Just loading up, team. So waiting for a few to jump on, and then we will stream live soon. Oh no, did that stop the stream? All right. Just waiting on this. Won't be long. Just about there. This time.
All right, got it. Oh, way deeper.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I'll record. Yeah, so how are you going so far?
Yeah, really well.
Yep. What's your biggest changes you noticed? Other than looking 10 years younger.
Yeah, that too, I suppose. It's all about the food. It's all about the food. Yeah, and I think that's just fundamental. It's all about the food. And unless you can figure out the diet, I think you can probably train as much as you like, but you wouldn't see the results, and your body just wouldn't get what it needs. So you've got to do that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the hard slog of discipline.
Yeah.
Which is the hardest part of it all. And it's sort of, I guess, I always use myself as an example, but, you know, shearing sheep for 9 hours a day, you see people who are overweight and, you know, they're sweating their absolute ass off for 9 hours. I'm like, if you can train that hard for 9 hours and still not lose weight, there's a missing piece to the puzzle, really. So, yeah. How you going, Das?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Good. How was are you on the barbecue tonight?
No, not tonight.
Okay, cool. Sweet as, mate. We're just asking how you're finding it so far. What's the biggest things you've known or learnt or realised?
I think it's still just learning more about kind of the food that I'm consuming, and you know, the more that I track, I kind of have a bit more knowledge and can kind of look at something and say, yes, that's a good choice, or no, that's not the best choice, or whatever. Like, I've kind of been able to, I've been ordering like takeaway probably once a week, and like today we had Jasmine, but like I chose like a salad, no dressings, but with extra guac. Just to kind of keep myself nice and full. But yeah, and then I guess also just reiterating how much preparation is key, because if things aren't prepped, it's easy for the wheels to fall off, and then you do just get really hangry and be like, fuck it.
Butter chicken and naan bread with an extra serving of ice cream. It's my biggest downfall. I wrote out all my we wrote out like our health maps today. And that was my biggest thing, is like, one of the questions that's in my journal is, what is it? A situation that might stress me out or trip me up. And I'm like, it's always being unprepared. That's when I like always muck up. You know, like I get to like a Wednesday or a Thursday and, you know, I'm tired already from the week's work. And then just all of a sudden I haven't prepared anything. And it's like, well, it's bloody 7 o'clock at night. What do I do? And I normally go on Uber Eats or something like that. And it's right now, it's like we've got everything in the fridge. And now it's just a matter of me saying, nah, I'm not getting that. I'm just going to eat what we got here. Sweet, guys. So I'm going to just basically give you a rundown of what to sort of expect and how to make most of phase 2. Because I guess we're at what I call like a transition phase. So when we go through different phases of whether it's training, whether it's, you know, a fat loss program, or basically anything we're doing, there's different phases and different cycles. Phase one is generally a foundation setup. So we're trying to set up the foundations for later on in the program. So in that phase, you probably realized, you know, like we did go through our diet boot camp, you know, the training intensity was, well, it was probably pretty high. But what we were aiming to do is set that base with a little bit lower intensity work. So a little bit lower intensity cardio, trying to get your steps up. As Josh said on some of the lives, was that, you know, we're trying to upregulate those enzymes so that we can mobilize fat as a fuel, and increase things like insulin sensitivity so that, you know, later on down the track, we're really getting the fast track to our goals. When we come into phase two, this is essentially a transition phase, and this can go two ways. It's you can continue on the same path that you're going on, or slightly speed it up, or it's where the brakes come on because we haven't quite mastered the basics or the foundations of the first phase. And so what we've got to do is just be, you know, make sure we're ticking the boxes, moving along, and then obviously making adjustments as we have to. One thing with this phase as well, because we're in the middle of like our training block and our last training block, like the final phase of this program, generally we do a lot more metabolic work. So during that will be, you know, generally the training program will burn a lot more fuel during the program, but you can only maintain that for a short while at a time. So during this phase, we're not quite at our really high intensity stuff, but we're sort of in the middle. So it is really important right now, as you said before, Jane, that, you know, diet is absolutely critical, or our nutrition is absolutely critical. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to go through a few different things on how to make the most of this. I wish I'd have recorded that because I said it quite well, but that's okay. Cool. So I'm just going to share my screen. I'll just make sure I got the right slides up. Cool. And so through this, like any questions you have, just let me know. So, yep, essentially we're going into phase two of our 12-week physique program, or our all-in program. And so this is weeks 5 to 9. Okay. And so probably the number one thing for this is having a make it happen mindset. Okay. And so as you probably realize, like some things are hard to do, as Das was saying, you know, it's like being prepared, you know, making sure the preparation is there, because if it's not, that's when the wheels fall off. Another thing is, like, if you really want to maximize everything during this, it's only a short window of time, I guess, in our lives. It's really about like, hey, do I have to potentially sacrifice something, whether it's, you know, half an hour on the TV at night time, or, you know, is it somewhere where I might have to give up, you know, a little bit of time during my lunchtime? But is there somewhere where I can make it happen, you know, whether it's in regards to a little bit of the extra movement, whether it's getting in extra steps, getting in 15 minutes before the workout, just to make sure you get in the extra cardio stuff, but essentially having a make it happen mindset. And if you can develop this is probably going to be the most critical thing, because it applies to everything, not just in this program, but in life. And so for the short window, like it's obviously at some point it comes to an end. But if you have it that make it happen mindset, you know, you find a way, I'm going to make it happen, you'll do really well. Probably the biggest key to this phase is our consistency and accuracy, okay? And so what we mean by that is essentially being a robot. So being as consistent as you possibly can. The more variation we have leads to the bigger variation, I guess, in results. Not necessarily in terms of the outcome results, but it's like when you start to add in lots of variation, it makes it very difficult to understand what's working and what's not. And so, for example, like let's say this week you eat the same thing every single day and you actually increase weight. And it's like, okay, well, what's going on there? We can look at your food, or we can look at what you're doing and be like, this is exactly what you did. Okay, let's make some changes to this. But if every single day is different, and you get a different result, or the result we didn't want, it's like, okay, which of these 7 different things do we need to change? And that makes it very, very difficult. So essentially, it's just a process of elimination. And it's all about just, if we have a consistent set of actions, we have a consistent result, and then it's quite easy to make consistent changes. We can speed up our fat loss essentially, or fast track our fat loss, or make sure that we're on track with it with our shred method, and I'll go into that in a second. If it's working, if what you're doing right now is working, just keep doing it, okay? Keep being consistent with what you're doing. Keep sticking to the process. Even if the outcome starts to slow down a touch, that's okay, as long as you know you're sort of on the path that you need to be. Generally, fat loss can slow down in the longer phases, but as long as you're sort of hitting that 0.5 kilo to 1 kilo a week, you're probably right on track. But as long as we're consistent, we can adjust what we're doing. And then essentially your weekly check-in is going to be even more important now. So I'll go into that. So how to be consistent and accurate. Okay, it makes, the number one thing with this is being consistent makes it easy, but it's also boring. Okay, it's probably the hardest thing, especially if this is the first time you've sort of done something like this, where it's essentially an all-in program. You probably find it's boring as hell, or it's a bit of a struggle. But the more times you go through something like this, the more boring it is. You realize, hey, look, this is just a process. I know exactly what to do because I've done it before. And so that's why we're trying to be as consistent as possible, because that'll help you long term understand, hey, look, anytime I want to do this, or anytime I'm in a good position to do this, I can just go back to what I was doing before. I know the process, I know the steps, and I just basically plug it in and go again. One of the best things is planning at least 1 day's full menu in advance. Okay, and so it was good that you posted your menus to the group before, because if we have at least one menu that we can use, and essentially like the whole point of having a menu is like, I could eat this for the rest of my life. I actually enjoy this. And then you're just going to use that 90% of the time. So let's say, for example, you've got your template menu, and then, every single day you just basically eat the same. But let's say, for example, you're out and about somewhere, or something comes up, and it's that 10% of the time where you need to make adjustments. You can make adjustments, but 90% of the time, you're using the same template over and over again. Makes it very easy, makes it consistent. Send in your MyFitnessPal screenshots for review. If you can do this every day, that would be amazing. Like essentially at the end of the day, when you clock off for the day, send them in, and like, we're happy to review them every day. Also, it lets us know that you're on track with that as well. So send them in each day, and we'll just review them the next day. Make sure your food measurements are accurate. All the little bits add up. And remember, this is a learning process, and eventually it'll become second nature. Das just touched on it, like now that she's measuring and tracking her food, she pretty much starting to know what's going into it, okay? And so essentially it's a data point, and the more we can do it and the more accurate we can be with it, the better. We'll do a video on this, but don't guess your measurements. Hey, that's a real challenging one. So I filled up 2 bowls of oats the other day. I was going to do a video on it, but I'll do one later on. Essentially 2 bowls of oats. One was quite a large bowl and one was quite a small bowl. And it was sort of like, what is the heaviest one? And the one that looked like, they basically looked the same, but there was about 200 or 300 grams difference. And that's a massive difference. So, it might look like a good portion, but essentially if we can weigh it and be like, hey, look, that's 50 grams, then it's 50 grams, 50 grams is 50 grams. It's not like, hey, that looks like 50 grams, because it might be 150. And that's essentially where it all adds up. And it can be, make it really challenging in terms of, like, you think you're doing the right thing, but then, the measurements and stuff like that aren't going in the right direction. So it just pays to be really accurate with it. If you ladies find anything that works really well for you in this too, feel free to share it to the group, because no doubt it's going to help the other ladies as well. Have you found anything so far that you found has helped you be a bit more consistent and accurate?
I think having to log your food, Dylan, in the Fitness Pal is the biggest thing, because you just don't realise what's in an orange or a kiwi or Greek yogurt or anything like that. And I think that then you can see the calories, you can see the macros, and that helps you then judge what's going in. And I think otherwise I felt like I was very blind about food before that.
What do you mean by that?
Like I ate because I wanted it rather than because I understood what nutrients it had in it. And now I understand what nutrients are in things. My whole sense of the motivation for eating something's different. So it's no longer about comfort and just because I want it. It's more about because it's going to be nutritious. And that's awesome. And that's a really important shift, I think, for me.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. That's been a big shift for myself too. When I went all in with my last program, I was like, I've tried it. I've done the shortcuts before, and they just don't work. Because with shortcuts, there's often like there's a return. There's something you got to pay the price somewhere else. And so when I went into this phase, I used a different measuring device called Chronometer. So it's slightly more advanced than MyFitnessPal. It tells you even the micronutrient breakdowns. So what I was doing every day is still trying to make sure I'm hitting all my minerals, all my vitamins, and different levels on that. And that was my main driver, is like, if I can get my food for the amount of calories I'm having to be as nutritious as possible, I was essentially going to perform better, and it made a massive difference. What about you, Liza?
Question again?
Is there anything that you've found has helped you be consistent and accurate?
Oh, for me, it's repetition. It's the same thing. I'd be quite happy. And what I sent you this afternoon, that this evening, I would just make up a whole pile of that and dole it out. Same thing. Very happy with that.
Awesome. Cool. Das?
Mine's probably kind of the opposite of Liza. It's being consistent in terms of trying to hit my macros and trying to make sure everything's balanced, but also making sure that I have enough variety in my food, that I don't get that bored feeling. Because as soon as I get that bored feeling, then I guess it's kind of a combination of both what Jane and Liza said. As soon as I get that bored feeling, it's that switch in my brain that is like, I know that I should be eating for nutrition, but I really just want to eat for comfort.
Yeah.
So if there's enough variety, then I don't get that FOMO kind of food feeling, I guess.
Yeah, so you're sort of saying, like, as long as you're within your parameters of like your macros and that, you're allowed a little bit of 100%.
I'm not that person that can just cook the same thing and have it all week. I can do it for some meals, but I definitely have to have variety in like my lunches and dinners, say, and keep breakfast all the same, just so that I don't get bored with it super quickly and end up on Uber Eats.
Yeah, cool. I went I had to go to Aldi today because I was like, there's something missing from my diet, and I was like, I had to go buy a box of ice creams. So
I was gonna say the ice cream.
Yeah. But I found one at Aldi. They got these carpety ones, and they're like 80 calories. And I was like, this is the most delicious thing I've ever bloody eaten. So it was really nice. And I'm the same as you, Das, where it's like just having that little bit of freedom is very, very good for me. But I find also too, like, I need the structure. If I don't have structure, that's when I'll just completely blow out, because I'll be like, I don't know where the fuck I am. It's halfway through the day. I don't know what I've eaten. Have I undereaten? And then I'm like, I'll normally say I'll undereaten, then I'll justify myself eating a butter chicken, you know? So that's my big one anyway. So that's why this is really good. And this is why this stuff is so individual. It's like everyone's slightly different and you need slightly different things, but it's the same tools applied in just a different context, which is cool. Sweet. So essentially, this is the way you can fast track your fat loss, and essentially why you need to move more. And so one of the biggest things is, like, right now your calories are quite low, okay? And so there's only so far that you can really take your calories before you start to just don't have enough fuel basically for your day, and you'll start to run out of nutrients because there's only so many nutrients that you can pack into a really low calorie diet. And so in terms of what we're aiming to do is get a fat loss adaptation or decrease our body fat through the use of training and good nutrition. And so what we can do, we do have a little bit of space to move with our calories, but we're going to save that for as long as we possibly can. Because when you just start to use calorie restriction as the only means of fat loss, then we can start to run in a little bit of trouble. But one way that you can, or essentially I'm just going to teach us a little bit about the behind the scenes of this program. So what we do for a start is we keep our strength training volume pretty much the same. So our amount of strength training we do never really decreases. There's a few reasons for this, is that we always want to maintain our lean muscle that we have or grow some more. Reasons for that being is that's going to keep our metabolic rate high. It's going to help to improve our insulin sensitivity. And so one way to look at it is that when we have glycogen in our muscles, it's essentially like our storage system. And so if what we're aiming to do with our strength training is increase the size of that luggage or the size of our overhead luggage compartment, or empty it, or make sure that there's enough space in there so that we can store our glycogen from our food in our muscle tissue rather than using insulin to store it as fat, because we can't obviously store it in our bloodstream because that is not very good for our body. So there's only really two places it can be stored. And so strength training, it uses glycogen mostly as fuel for the training. So what that's doing is essentially taking glycogen from the muscles, which is creating space. And then we're also, after training, if we have carbs after training, we're able to refill that space or fuel our cabin with more glycogen so that we don't go and store it as body fat, okay? So that's why our strength training stays high. Also, if we can increase our muscle even by up to 2 to 5 kilos, that is going to help us with a daily increase of our metabolic rate of roughly about 100 to 200 calories per day. And it doesn't really sound like a lot in terms of you look at how much that is over the course of your total food day, but over the course of the week, that's 1,400 calories. Which if you look at your current meal plan, you're on around 1,400 to 1,500 calories, somewhere around there. So it's essentially an extra day of food, that you're burning in terms of just from the increase in lean muscle mass. And that's why over time, especially as you get older, the more lean muscle mass you can have. And I haven't seen any studies on this, but it's probably one of the things that I think is probably true, is that everyone says hey, look, you get to 30 and you start to get fat, or pretty much is as you age, your metabolism slows down. And basically as you age, your lean muscle mass decreases as well. So I'd say it's probably pretty highly correlated that our lean muscle mass decreases, our metabolism decreases, we put on weight. So if we can reverse that, we essentially reverse that process and allow ourselves to carry on. So one of the other ways we want to do is essentially time most of our carbs around our training. So now that we've reintroduced our low GI carbs, if we can either have a little bit of carbs before training to allow us to train harder for our training session, and then our carbs after training, then we're going to use those carbs basically in our muscles and those glycogen stores. So we use the muscles. If you use a little bit of carbs just before training, it's going to give us a little bit of carbohydrate in the bloodstream so that we can train a little bit harder. But then also it's going to, after training, it's going to help to restore those glycogen stores in our muscles, which will help with our repair, will help to bring down cortisol, and it will help us to recover faster. Plus, it's also making the most of that fuel source. So we're making the best use of that fuel source as we go. Especially if you're plus 30% body fat, okay? So we want to increase or improve our insulin sensitivity as much as we possibly can. And there's good indications that above 30%, our insulin sensitivity is probably not quite as good as it could be. So we just want to make sure that we can use the most of that. the other time to use your carbs is at nighttime. So carbohydrates will help with serotonin production, which will help to calm down, which helps you sleep as well. And quite often you'll hear people that can't sleep, and I'm like, oh, do you eat carbs at nighttime? And they're like, no, I don't want to eat carbs at nighttime. It makes me fat. And it's like, we know now by going through this program that it's not the carbohydrates that make you fat, it's the increase in calories, or, you know, the decrease in movement over time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Then we get into our movement. So our steps, ideally, if we can hit, I know you're starting to work towards your 10K now, but ideally, if you can hit 12K per day, that's going to be really good. And ideally, if you can do some of this in a fasted state, so in the morning. So let's say you got an extra 15 or 20 minutes in the morning. Like, let's say you walk to the gym, you know, and you haven't had any food, that can add up to, you know, that can add up to a couple thousand steps, and it can actually help upregulate those enzymes that help to metabolize fat, and it can be very helpful. And so just making time for those extra steps throughout the day can make a big, big difference. Well, it does make a big difference to the overall fat loss in the end. And then also we have our shred method, okay? And so one thing with all the training that we're doing, obviously we're spending at the moment up to 5 to 6 hours a week training, which is a fair whack. But if we can add in 20 minutes of some interval work as well, 1 to 4 times a week, that can actually really help with the fat loss process as well. So what we have is essentially 2 types of cardio or conditioning for this. We have our LISS, or our low intensity steady state. So with our low intensity steady state, what it does is this will essentially help to mobilize body fat. Because it's done at a lower intensity, what it will do is use cortisol to essentially mobilize body fat as fuel, because it's not in the glycolytic zone, so it won't use as much glycogen as fuel. You actually start to metabolize, you'll move body fat as a fuel. And then what we do is we come in with 8 minutes of intervals, which is more of the high intensity stuff. And essentially what this will do is it come along and use that fat, or I sort of think of it as like a mop. It's coming along and mopping up that released energy. Because it is a high intensity method, it needs that energy right away. So it'll come along because you've released that energy, comes along, mops it up, and it's a really good way to increase your fat loss through that. It is obviously 20 minutes extra, but it can add up to some very, very big results at the end. Also managing your recovery. So one of the things that I've noticed, especially with Liza and Jane, is your recovery is going bloody well in terms of the Morpheus. It seems like your HRV is basically increasing week by week, and your recovery scores seem to be pretty good. Like, you're not really dropping down into the 40s and 50s on the recovery score anymore, which is awesome to see. One of the things with this is when we start to add on, obviously, a little bit more extra movement, what we're doing is we're using cortisol to essentially mobilize energy. And so if we have stressful jobs, if we have stressful training, obviously being in a calorie deficit as well, it's all stressful. So if we continuously add on more stress with some more energy requirements through interval training, there is a chance that potentially, like, our body doesn't recover from it. So ways to realize if our body is not managing this training load is that you have a rapid weight loss. So I'm a perfect example for this. So before Christmas, I lost about 7.5 kilos in just on 2 weeks. And it's because I applied this too well. Okay. What happened is that rapid weight loss led me into a very, very big hole. And essentially I couldn't train properly for about 2 or 3 months after that. I'm pretty sure I had very good symptoms of something like adrenal fatigue. The doctors wouldn't diagnose it because Western medicine doesn't believe in it, but I'm pretty sure I wasn't far off it. But that was a very, very good sign. This is something that I measure with my sharing clients, and that quite often, if they're a month or 2 out from their world records, if they're decreasing in weight very, very quickly, it's like we have to get on top of that very, very fast. So that's why 0.5 kilo to 1 kilo a week is optimal for a fat loss phase. You can get away with up to 2 kilos, but anywhere above that, you're starting to play with a bit of fire. But it's obviously too, like, how much extra time do you have to put in? And this stuff can make a difference. But as I said at the start, if you can have that make it happen mindset and you can find a way to get this in, it does pay big returns as well. Cool. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. All right. So the last little part of this is our checklist for phase 2 and to have some great success. Cool. So what you got to do is obviously hit all your training sessions. So you're going really well so far, hitting all your training sessions. So just make sure, as much as you can, hit them. How you been going, Das, without much training?
Yeah. Yeah,
you
I
were keen to
struggled
get
last
back
week a
into
little
it this
bit.
week now?
Yeah, and very
Now we
sad
got
that
lockdown.
COVID effed me over there. Yeah, I struggled a bit. I think like a combination of the stress. I mean, I was happy because I maintained my weight the week that I was away. I didn't lose, but I didn't gain. But I think, yeah, the combination of the stress of being away and like the stress of putting my body through the hard work that we do while we're away. I definitely think that I saw how much stress kind of affects progress.
Yeah, awesome.
But yeah, I think mostly, I think not training kind of also limits my ability to recover, if that makes sense. So when I train, I feel like I've actually expended my energy and I sleep better and then I can recover better. But not having that, I was going a little bit stir crazy. But I did up my steps a little bit. I was kind of averaging about 12 to 15,000 steps a day. So I don't know.
And you're also pretty consistent too for being away.
Yeah. My food was pretty good, which was
that's awesome. Cool. Well, this week we've got like a heap of bodyweight workouts as well. So your home workouts. So hopefully it's only for 2 days, but we will see. So yeah, this week basically hit all your training sessions. Just make it happen, whatever comes our way. Nutrition compliance for this phase. Okay, so the last phase we were sort of working on roughly at 80% compliance to our nutrition. This phase we want to hit that 90%. Okay, so hey.
Hey, who told me about the 80%?
Exactly, it's good, eh? we keep that secret.
Little mushroom in the corner.
Yeah. So this phase is we want to try and make it even more. Okay, so generally when most people start off a program, you're either all in right from the start and you can do very, very well, or you're sort of headed around that 80%. Now we're aiming for 90%. The last phase, we're going to hit it 100%, no matter what. It's just like everything, just consistent as, finish strong. Shred method, 1 to 4 days per week. So if you can get this in at least one extra day a week, it's probably going to add up to anywhere between, a couple hundred calories extra burnt, which does make a big difference towards the end. Obviously, make your live education calls Monday and Wednesday, and then send in your screenshots of your meal reviews, ideally every day, and then weekly check-in form at the end of the week. Share your wins to the group. Also, any challenges or any questions, ask your coaches as soon as you possibly can, okay? Cool?
Yeah. Thanks, Dylan.
Does anyone have any questions?
No.
Awesome.
I still want to know where I missed that 80%.
You just pat yourself on the back for being even better, even more compliant. So it's like a gold star if you do better. So Das, have you got any questions?
Yeah, with the shred method, is that so it's just interval? Does it matter like what intervals we do? Is that already part of like one of the? Could we model it off like the Tuesday or Thursday session?
Yeah, pretty much. But so keep it real simple. Basically, what it is 20 minutes. So week 5, you'll do 12 minutes of just like steady state. So roughly 130, 140 beats per minute, just on like the assault bike or something like that. And then you're going to do 8 minutes of 30 on, 30 off intervals on either the sleds, the road, the bike, or the ski.
Okay.
Cool. So essentially that's there. I'll post this up in the group as well so you can see it.
Yeah, I just don't have my glasses on, so I didn't read it properly.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
fine. Yeah. So essentially, it's just like 12 minutes or less. So it's like 12 minutes of easy, and then you got 8 minutes of hard. Yeah. So it's similar to what we do in our conditioning sessions. But yeah, it's just a little bit of a top up. Basically, ideally, it'd be done on the day that you do your strength training days.
So it could just be like a walk or something, and you walk for the 12 minutes at, you know, a fastish rate, and then you find a hill and just run up the hill and
Pretty much. Yeah.
back
100%.
down the hill or something like that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So like when you're doing the 30 seconds, you want to sort of get up to about 170 beats per minute. When you're doing the 12 minutes, you're probably working at about 130, 140, maybe 150 at the most. And then you sort of, hit it real hard.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Sweet ladies. Oh, well, have a good night, and we will catch you tomorrow.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Dylan.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.